Federico Fellini, an astrological portrait by Ciro Discepolo. The critic Daumier has hanged himself, and director Guido, now free from all mental conditioning, gives free rein to his childish spirit and runs with the circus clowns around the ring, accompanied by the music of cymbals, drums, and trumpets. We are at the final scene of Otto e Mezzo, the film that better than any other expresses the underlying structures on which Fellini the man and Fellini the artist are built. The film was made in 1963 and follows shortly after a psychoanalytic experience that undoubtedly benefited the director, as it gave him greater clarity and awareness of his problems. For this reason, the film, seemingly difficult to decipher, is very explicit and lays bare the various Fellinis that move within Federico and are symbolized by the characters in the story. The best way to illustrate his birth chart is precisely to refer to the film. We are in a health resort, the first indication of a pathological condition requiring treatment, and the director Guido is about to start filming, but he's in crisis because he hasn't decided whether to work following the most original impulses of his soul or the technical advice of the critic and writer Daumier, who urges him to be coherent, rational, faithful to a concrete discourse, and striving for a socially and culturally valid goal. The story unfolds on the basis of this dialectical and polemical confrontation, punctuated at times by the appearance of ethereal or carnal, maternal or sensual female figures, representing the opposing poles of his soul. Many religious figures also appear, or disappear haphazardly from the scene in a series of flashes of the protagonist's past. His crisis ends with the death of the critic, leaving Guido free to express himself as he feels, happy to have found himself in an authentic and spontaneous dimension. It is not difficult to recognize in the pairing of Daumier and Guido the corresponding animus anima that conflictingly solicits Federico Fellini the man. The critic is none other than the extremely rigid superego that appears in the subject's horoscope, namely the absolute dominant of the chart, Saturn. Saturn is in fact angular to the ascendant and rules Capricorn, a sign occupied at his birth by the Sun, Moon, and Mercury, the latter lord of the Virgo ascendant, where Saturn is also present. Therefore, a fundamental aspect of the subject's personality is linked to the Earth Capricorn-Saturn values, which relate to complexes, frustrations, reasoning, concreteness, repression of emotion, self-criticism, etc. We believe there is no doubt that the director has always suffered from feelings of inferiority, which were the basis of his cinematic themes. As evidence of this judgment, here are some quotes from the character himself. "I am inclined, in short, to reconcile, partly also so as not to be looked upon with resentment, with hatred, so as not to be said to not care about others." La Stampa, March 1973. "During the day, since I was thin and had a complex about it, they called me Gandhi or Mantis Shrimp. I didn't wear a swimsuit." La mia Rimini, Capelli, 1967. "Happiness is being able to tell the truth without making anyone cry." Otto e Mezzo. And we could go on. Note the recurring theme of the desire not to offend others, which is a clear symptom of an insecure nature. Such saturnine heaviness, however, does not reign supreme in the chart, but is contrasted with the stellium values in the fifth house. Already, from a first psychological evaluation of the subject examined, it is clear that for a compensatory mechanism to exist, there must necessarily be a temperamental component that tends toward the opposites of the values mentioned. that is, towards spontaneity, childishness, instinct, immaturity, etc. If we add to this the properties of a heavily occupied fifth house, we find the character of Guido from Otto e Mezzo in its entirety. Guido Fellini loves to express himself freely. He loves play and the circus. Why the circus? Because it represents the most authentic remnants of the child's soul, with its clowns, its lights, its colors, its music, its children, its animals. And this way of creating and living, at the same time without the fixed limit that a man of letters or a painter must have, but of being immersed in the action. That's what the circus spectacle is. Cahiers de la radio-télévision belge, Bruxelles 1962. If the circus was still a genre of entertainment of any relevance, I would have loved to be the director of a large circus, because the circus is precisely a mixture of technique, precision, and improvisation, as above. I could never have hoped so much. I do what I want. I have a job that's a game. I still make puppets like when I was 8, and I always have fun. La Stampa, March 1973. Guido and Daumier coexisted haphazardly and for a long time in Fellini's work, until the latter hanged, suffocated, the latter in 8½. Perhaps it would have been more accurate in reference to reality to simply set the critic aside without assassinating him. Indeed, although there was a decisive turning point in the artist's work after the aforementioned film, we cannot say that the shadow of that rigid superego was completely extinguished. 8½ was made in 1963, the year in which Uranus in Revolution opposed his own radical position, and it is therefore quite logical that there was a significant transformation in the artist's thought and work. It is not difficult to recognize in the films following this period a lesser formal stylistic research in favor of a more poetic and genuine expression. Before concluding these comments on Fellini's birth chart, it is interesting to highlight some other particularly significant aspects of it. First, it's worth mentioning his religiosity. The 9th house of the horoscope is empty, while we find a Neptune-Jupiter conjunction, ruler of the 3rd house, in good aspect to Venus in the 4th house. This should be interpreted, in our opinion, as meaning that his religiosity isn't toward something, but from something. That is, Federico Fellini isn't driven by a mystical quest as an expression of a spiritual choice, but rather by a spiritual inheritance inherited from his childhood education. This childhood education was acquired almost exclusively in religious institutions and felt like a prison. Saturn in the 12th house. Another interesting element in understanding Fellini's character is his strong maternal image. I'm talking about balanced signs. The altruism-selfishness combination is a characteristic of Leo, but it's also common to Aquarius. Superficiality often accompanies Gemini, but also Sagittarius, etc. In our case, it's clear how Cancer's mummism is also present in this classic Capricorn representative, who has always included those famous female characters with enormous breasts in his films, a symbol of breastfeeding and therefore motherhood. The director has always been tenderly attached to his mother, his family of origin, and memories of the past, as evidenced by the strong Venus, angular at the bottom of the sky. Finally, as a curiosity, it's worth noting that the damaged Mars in the 2nd house has manifested itself, among other things, in recent years, with significant theft suffered by the subject and his family.